been blessed to know the kids from the beginning and since they were babies till now. It's just heartbreaking.
They were very good in helping the community. And
They were a wonderful family. We felt like they were part of our family.
Picture a loving husband and wife, both with great jobs, raising 3 happy children in the serene green fields of rural Ohio. What's the first thing that comes to mind? Joy, wholesomeness, the American dream. That's probably what most people thought of when they saw the Dunham family, but they were wrong. Beneath the picture-perfect facade of middle America they represented, Jason and Melissa Dunham hid a nightmarish darkness that would shake their peaceful community to its core. This is the story of their horrific end, an end that came at the hands of the man who was supposed to protect them. This is the story of the haunting final days of the Dunham family and the brutal quintuple homicide that investigators struggle to wrap their heads around to this very day. Stay tuned while we unpack this spine-chilling tale. Melissa Dunham was the dictionary definition of a corn-fed, heartland-grown Ohio girl. Born and raised in the Buckeye State, she enjoyed a healthy upbringing with loving parents who gave her everything she wanted. A talented student, Melissa went on to get her MBA from Kent State, followed by yet another master's degree in taxation from the University of Akron. With such impressive academic credentials, she was destined for a well-paying career as an accountant, and she found a home for herself at a firm called Bober Markey Fedorovich, or BMF for short. When she was just 24 years old, she stuck with the firm for 18 years and won countless awards for her exceptional performance. Among her many accolades was a Woman of Excellence award from the Women's Network and a 30 for the Future award from the Greater Akron Chamber in 2019. To be clear, these awards weren't from her employer but from outside institutions that were impressed by her skills. In June of 2023, just 2 months before her demise, the now 42-year-old Melissa was made partner at the company. There were no two ways about it, Melissa was a rising star. It seemed like she had nowhere to go but up. Her husband Jason, on the other hand, seemed like more of a mystery. We don't know much about where he grew up or how he ended up in Ohio, but it appears that he had a decent career as well. Based on reports, 46-year-old Jason worked in the sales and business development department of a company called POS Highway. While this likely earned him a solid income, his job wasn't quite as prestigious as his wife's. Could this have caused friction between them? Perhaps Jason resented his wife for earning more than him, or perhaps there were other factors that we've yet to uncover. Either way, these potential issues didn't stop Jason and Melissa from starting a beautiful family. Not long after Melissa started working at BMF, she and Jason got together and quickly hit it off. They didn't waste time before getting married, and by 2008, they became the proud parents of a daughter named Renee, who was 15 at the time of her demise. Over the next few years, they had another daughter named Amber and a son named Evan, who were 12 and 9 years old, respectively, when the incident occurred. The family lived in a comfortable home in Lake Township, about 15 miles away from Akron, where they became beloved members of the community. All the children were known for being sporty and outgoing, with Renee and Amber participating in the Girl Scouts and Evan joining the Boy Scouts at a young age. Melissa was heavily involved in these activities too. Often encouraging the girls to sell cookies for the Girl Scouts and write thank you letters to people that bought boxes, much like their mother, the children were overachievers at school. Both Renee and Amber were part of the school band, with Amber showing considerable talent in cross-country events as well. But outside of their accomplishments, each child had a distinct personality. Everyone could see them becoming their true selves as they grew up. Renee, a tomboy who loved working with her hands, could often be found outside doing yard work. Her mother never had to ask her to rake the leaves, that was just something Renee enjoyed doing. As for Amber, she was about as girly as a girl could be, often showing a generous streak that made her a neighborhood darling. According to witness statements, she loved baking and would regularly make treats for her neighbors. Evan, the youngest, had recently found a passion for Legos, suggesting that he liked building things and solving puzzles. On top of that, he was apparently able to solve a Rubik's Cube in under 2 minutes, which further shows how highly intelligent he was at such a young age. The children also seemed to have a great relationship with each other, frequently playing video games together or running around outside with their 2 dogs. Each member of the family was like a piece of a puzzle that was meant to fit together, except for Jason. Jason was always a bit of a mystery, even to his neighbors. One member of the community, Rebecca Gire, stated that she often met with Melissa and always enjoyed her company, but despite living close by for years, she'd never met Jason even once. Of course, there were some neighbors who had interacted with the Dunham patriarch, like Edmund and Denise Gacko, who lived right next door. There were some signs that Jason was a decent person, at least according to the Gackos. He'd helped them put a basketball hoop up, and whenever they saw him with the children, it seemed like they got along fairly well. But with that said, Denise has also spoken out about how controlling Jason could be, though she hasn't gone into detail about his behavior. There's a lot that we can guess based on what eventually happened. One can speculate that Jason was a man with a very short temper, what he said was final, and any arguments would lead to him flying off the handle. The children seemed well adjusted despite this, and he wasn't able to hold Melissa back in her career, but the seeds of what was to come had already been planted. The odd thing is, local police hadn't received any domestic dispute reports from the Dunhams until that fateful day when they all lost their lives. Could the family have been keeping something from the community? Were either of the parents having an affair? There's also a chance that the children were causing friction, especially considering that Amber and Renee were entering a rebellious age. Whatever the case may be, something strange started happening in late August as the summer of 2023 started to draw to a close. Neighbors noticed that the children weren't coming out to play as much. Before this, they were practically always outdoors, riding their bikes and playing fetch with the dogs, though they also loved to play video games. All 3 children were known for being active, so barely a day went by that the neighbors didn't see them. They also happened to be a part of Rebecca Gire's morning routine, with the neighbor reporting that they always waved to her while walking to their bus stop. All of a sudden, those smiles were nowhere to be found, and their outdoor play sessions basically came to a halt. The Gackos saw the children often, since they usually came over to play with their grandchildren. These visits had also stopped over the past few days, and the colorful cupcakes Amber used to bring over were curiously absent too. Where were these children all of a sudden? Did something happen that made them want to stay indoors? Based on what we know about the father, it's possible that Jason wasn't allowing them to go outside anymore. Why he'd impose such a restriction is anybody's guess, but some have theorized that he was already entering a homicidal state of mind. Tensions were rising in the Dunham household, and nobody in the area knew what was about to happen. On the 23rd of August, something extremely unusual happened. Melissa failed to show up for work. This was a woman who prided herself on her punctuality and work ethic. She never took unannounced days off, so this behavior raised some suspicion with her coworkers and superiors. They didn't make much of it, though, possibly assuming that Melissa was down with a cold. After an 18-year spotless record, they must have figured that she deserved to just take a day to herself for a change. But when Melissa didn't show up the next day as well, mental alarm bells started going off. She wasn't answering her phone, she wasn't responding to texts, and no one had any idea where she could be. With so many unanswered questions, her coworkers decided it was time to call the police. What they'd find at the Dunham residence would haunt them for the rest of their lives. At 7:30 p.m. on August 24th, police arrived at the Dunham family home on Carnation Avenue and found Jason and Melissa's cars present outside. They clearly hadn't gone anywhere, so why weren't they answering the phone? What's more, what appeared to be days' worth of mail had piled up outside their home. Packages were strewn across the lawn, letters were lying in piles, and overall it seemed like the Dunhams had been away for a while, and yet their cars were right outside. Something was wrong, and the police needed to find out what. The door was locked, so police requested the help of Edmund Gacko to gain entry. Once they made their way inside, they were overcome by the stench of rotting flesh. As the police moved in, they eventually came across 5 bodies that were pumped full of bullets. These bodies belonged to the Dunham family, and from the looks of things, they'd been dead for at least 2 days. It took the police 2 hours to enter the home. After making the discovery, they officially declared them dead at 9:52 p.m. and started an investigation. They found no signs of forced entry, and the only weapon on the scene belonged to the Dunhams themselves. It turned out that both Melissa and Jason had concealed carry permits, so there was no chance that someone else had brought the firearm into their home. Further investigation revealed no signs of foul play, so the police were left with only one conclusion: this was a case of a domestic dispute gone wrong. Police theorized that Jason and Melissa had gotten into an argument that turned violent, and once the gun was brought out, there was no turning back. Police acknowledged that the homicides were committed with a handgun, and there was no question about who had pulled the trigger. If the testimony of the neighbors was anything to go by, Jason's temper had gotten the better of him. This meant that he'd not only gunned down his wife but his own children as well. Following this, he turned the gun on himself and pulled the trigger. The only question was, why? What possible motive could there be for him to commit a quadruple homicide? If the Dunhams had had loud arguments in the past, the neighbors would have heard them and reported them to the police. And there's an even more curious element to this story: how did nobody hear the gunshots in such a close-knit community? Neighbors tend to know everything about each other's lives. Despite that, Jason was able to fire off multiple shots without alerting anyone in the vicinity. No silencer was found on the scene, so the only other way he could have muffled the shots was through a pillow or cushion of some sort. If this is how it happened, it implies that Jason's actions were cold, calculated, and completely intentional. He wasn't in a fit of rage, and he wasn't acting impulsively. While police haven't released any information on the number of shots fired, at least 4 must have gone off before Jason shot himself. Was this something he'd been planning for a while? That might explain how no one knew about it for days, but it doesn't explain the police's explanation that it was all just a domestic dispute. It's almost like Jason snapped out of nowhere, but the violent impulses that compelled him to act must have been simmering beneath the surface for quite some time. A single homicide could be an act of passion, but 4? That requires a level of cold-bloodedness. Despite his sometimes controlling and off-putting demeanor, Jason had never exhibited signs of being a cold-blooded killer in the past. Of course, there's no real way to know exactly what happened that night. All we can do is examine the evidence and testimony to piece together theories. Since the likely perpetrator died on the scene, it seems like there won't be any justice for the Dunham family. This remains a mystery that may never be solved, because anyone who could have provided answers also lost their life that night. The death of this beloved family triggered an outpouring of grief from coworkers, classmates, and neighbors alike. We've known the kids since they were babies, and it's just heartbreaking. They were so good at helping the community. They were a wonderful family. We felt like they were part of our family, said one neighbor. The tight-knit, faith-based community promised to lean on one another for support during this trying time. While giving an interview, their neighbor Edmund Gacko nearly broke down in tears while talking about the children. He had watched them grow up ever since the Dunhams moved next door 18 years ago. At the start of the summer, they had even played a baseball game together in their front yard, with Jason acting perfectly normal at the time. And now, in the blink of an eye, they were all gone. Sarah Martin, chief operating officer of BMF, expressed the devastation felt by the entire company over Melissa's loss. Melissa wasn't just a coworker or an asset to them, she was a friend of 18 years, a woman who deserved many more decades of success. She could have easily been running the place in a few years, but instead, she'll be remembered as the mother tragically shot by her husband in her own home. The news hit the school just as hard. Melissa and Jason's daughter, Renee, was scheduled to perform with the school band at an away game. She was the second loss the school had experienced in the past year, though the previous death was due to surgery. This double blow shattered the children's spirits. The school district had to bring in a crisis response team, with counselors and support workers to help the students cope with the tragedy. Although there was no way to save the family, their community still held a candlelight vigil in their honor. Uniontown Police Chief Michael Johnson described it as the most gruesome case he had ever seen in his 23-year-long career. In February 2024, a close family friend, Angelia Lehman, organized a scholarship in the Dunham's honor. This scholarship will allow the family's legacy to live on, offering financial assistance to seniors graduating from Lake High School who want to pursue higher education. The scholarship commemorates a legacy of community outreach, teamwork, and believing in something greater than oneself. Perhaps the best way to sum up their impact is through a video Melissa had recorded for the Greater Akron Chamber. In it, she speaks fondly of Lake Township, talking about how much she loved being part of the community. She shared how the local schools challenged her children and how the small town still provided countless opportunities for those who lived there. It's a wonderful community to raise our children in. I have ties with organizations like Community Support Services and the Girl Scouts of Northeast Ohio. The schools are amazing, and they challenge my children. It's a great place to live, thrive, and grow, she said. However, Jason Dunham is not remembered as fondly. His shocking actions have left the community in disbelief and grief. It will likely be years before the Gacko family, the Jers, and the other neighbors can fully heal from this devastating loss. What do you think of this case? Do you believe it was simply a domestic dispute gone horribly wrong, or did Jason have darker intentions that no one ever noticed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you want more videos like this, please like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more true crime stories. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one.